This is the video associated with the ER model constructs. So at this point, the project should have forced you to start using the ER assistant. So you should be familiar with the concepts of what an entity is, or what an entity type is. You should understand what a relationship means between entities, and you should have a fairly clear idea of what an attribute is. So again, looking back at what the ER assistant would create for you, here's a sample ER diagram. And we know that using the ER assistant will draw this for us. We don't have to draw this by hand. And I don't want you to draw this by hand. I want you to use the ER assistant to help you with this. So, when we talk about things like a supplier is associated with shipment, you can see that a shipment, in order to have a shipment, you need a supplier. It's mandatory that you have a supplier, and you can only have one supplier. So that's why where you see sends, the word sends, wish would stop moving on me. So where you see the word sends, you see two hashed lines. So that means it's required and only one. Whereas opposite of that, you see sent by. So that means a shipment is sent by a supplier, and a supplier can send many shipments, but I can have a supplier record that is never associated with a shipment. So that the circle is optional, the crow's foot means many. And you can see that throughout the sample ER diagram with the little balloons that tell you things. And then down on the bottom, you have keys, right? So you have an entity type is a box, the line is a relationship, and then you can see the cardinalities. You have mandatory one, you have optional one, you have mandatory many, and you have optional many. And again, this should be pretty familiar to you because you should have already been using the ER assistant. And then here's again some basic entity relationship notation. We have different symbols. You may or may not have run into the entity types yet in using the ER assistant. We'll be getting more into these. But symbol-wise, if you're a strong entity, you're simply a box. If you're a weak entity, you are a double-bordered box. Or in most cases, what you'll see is the corners will be hashed. And you'll see that in the ER assistant when you look at the advanced video. And then there are associative entities, and those by definition are weak, but you'll see it many times as a rounded, cornered entity. Again, the ER assistant, the attributes, that attribute symbols, the single underscore would be a primary key, and if it's double underlined, that's a part of a primary key. And then you have other attributes. We're going to get into derived and multi-valued and composite attributes in later chapters, but just so you can see the symbols. Then when we get to relationships, there are degrees of relationships. You can have a unary relationship, which means the entity is related to itself. We'll get to that. That typically means that you have, say, we'll get to that later. There are binary relationships, which means you have one relationship between two entities, and you have a ternary relationship where you have three entities that are all related one to another. And on the bottom, you see the relationship cardinality, but that was covered in a previous slide. And that is the end of the lecture associated with ER model constructs.